The town did not change. That is the first error most records make. They assume change requires a moment, a date that can be circled, a construction phase, a documented failure that can be isolated and named. They search for a point of origin. They locate a structure, a system, a decision, and say, there. But Ravenwood did not become irregular when attention arrived. It was already behaving in ways that resisted explanation, already correcting itself without instruction, already absorbing inconsistencies without escalation, already learning which questions did not produce outcomes worth pursuing. These behaviors were not dramatic. They were not disruptive. They did not interrupt routine. They simply persisted. What followed did not introduce instability. It recognized suitability. Recognition requires evidence. Evidence requires documentation. The first recorded incident was not the first occurrence. It was the first instance that remained visible after correction, not because it caused harm, not because it disrupted routine, not because it exceeded tolerance, because it repeated without resolving and continued to be acceptable. The event itself was minor. The response was correct. The outcome was stable. What failed was alignment between what was written and what continued. And once the writing stopped matching reality, the writing became the problem. This archive does not describe the beginning of irregularity. It documents the moment when documentation ceased to fully contain experience. The town continued to function. That mattered more than explanation. And because Ravenwood remained intact, the inconsistency was allowed to remain as well. This archive contains reconstructed municipal notes, utility maintenance logs, internal correspondence, school memoranda, transportation summaries, and regional exchanges compiled from the period later referenced as the town's first documented variants. The materials were not collected contemporaneously. They were assembled later from existing storage, secondary archives, and partial departmental holdings. Some records are incomplete. Some exist in more than one finalized version. Several entries show evidence of revision without accompanying notation or authorization. Dates are consistent where possible. Where discrepancies appear, all versions have been retained. Language has been preserved exactly as it appeared at the time of filing. Formatting irregularities remain uncorrected. No attempt has been made to determine which version of any document is most accurate. All versions were retained. This reflects local administrative practice during the period in question. What follows is the expanded record. There is a persistent assumption that towns move cleanly from one state to another, before and after, functional and altered, stable and compromised. Ravenwood does not support this structure. Prior to the period covered in this archive, irregularities were present but unclassified. They were experienced individually and resolved informally. They did not require escalation because they did not interfere with daily continuity. Residents did not describe these occurrences as events. They described them as conditions, a light that behaved unpredictably, a clock that could not be relied upon, a route that felt longer in one direction than the other. Each instance was minor. Each could be explained. Each explanation was sufficient on its own. Together, they formed a background that did not invite scrutiny. The first recorded incident did not emerge because conditions worsened. It emerged because repetition outpaced explanation. A single inconsistency appeared in official documentation. It was addressed according to standard procedure. When it persisted, the procedure was repeated. When repetition failed to resolve it, the outcome was still categorized as acceptable. At no point did the situation meet criteria for emergency response. No threshold was crossed. No authority was compelled to intervene. The town continued to operate within expected limits. What distinguished this moment from those before, it was not severity, it was retention. The inconsistency remained visible in the system. It was neither corrected nor removed. It stayed accessible. Later records would refer back to it, not as a warning, as a reference. This archive exists because Ravenwood did not remove what failed to resolve itself. It learned to work around it instead. Prior to what would later be categorized as the first recorded incident, Ravenwood operated within parameters considered acceptable by every standard available to it. Municipal summaries from the period describe a town that functioned efficiently, if narrowly. Budgets balanced within tolerable margins. Schools remained open and consistently staffed. Roads were repaired often enough to remain usable. Utilities failed intermittently as they did everywhere else. There are no documents from this period that suggest anticipation of disruption. No projections indicate concern. No contingency plans reference escalation. No internal memos express uncertainty about future conditions. This absence is consistent across departments. Ravenwood did not experience volatility. It also did not experience precision. These qualities were not treated as incompatible. Stability, as it was understood locally, did not require accuracy. It required continuation. If something continued without worsening, it was stable. If it repeated without consequence, it was manageable. If it could be worked around, it was acceptable. This framework governed every decision that followed. Early planning documents emphasize practicality over optimism. The land was advertised as workable, affordable, quiet. Settlers arrived with tools, families, and expectations shaped by necessity rather than ambition. The surrounding forest was dense. The soil was uneven. Parcel boundaries were difficult to maintain. Initial survey maps show irregularities that were never fully explained. Distances measured on foot did not align with distances recorded on paper. Streets appear longer in municipal drawings than they do when walked. Property lines shift between revisions by small but persistent margins. These discrepancies were addressed administratively. Measurements were corrected. Figures were rounded. Margins were adjusted. No follow-up inspections were ordered. No one returned to the fields to check again. The land was declared compliant. Construction continued. From its earliest records, Ravenwood demonstrated a tendency toward quiet non-compliance with expectation. Not dramatic, not defiant, persistent. Infrastructure reports from the 1930s onward describe Ravenwood as aging earlier than comparable towns. This assessment appears repeatedly. It is not supported by installation dates. It is not challenged. Road surfaces wore unevenly. Painted lane markings faded at inconsistent rates along the same stretch of pavement. Repairs conducted with identical materials produced varied longevity. Fresh asphalt near the forest boundary lasted longer than newer material elsewhere. Painted lines in certain intersections remained crisp through winters that eroded everything else. None of this triggered review. Inconsistency alone was not treated as evidence of defect. When resurfacing was required, it was completed. When it failed sooner than expected, it was scheduled again. The cycle repeated. The documentation remained calm. Electrical service records from this period show brief interruptions and momentary dimming that did not correlate with weather, load, or seasonal demand. Lights flickered and returned. Circuits reset without manual input. Appliances resumed operation without damage. Utility companies attributed this behavior to outdated infrastructure. Follow-up inspections found no faults requiring replacement. Service notes repeat identical phrasing across decades. Operational upon inspection. No actionable defect identified. Continue monitoring. Monitoring did not alter outcomes. The absence of escalation was treated as confirmation that no further action was required. Timekeeping inconsistencies were common and tolerated. Household clocks drifted by minutes over the course of a day. Public clocks corrected themselves at irregular intervals. School bells rang early or late without mechanical cause. Maintenance checks found no faults. Synchronization attempts were recorded. Results did not persist. Schedules continued to function. Buses arrived. Classes changed. Workdays ended. Precision was not required for continuity. Maintenance culture in Ravenwood emphasized response over diagnosis. Problems were addressed quickly. Causes were considered secondary once functionality returned. Work orders from this period are brief. Descriptions favor outcome over process. Adjusted, reset, replaced. These terms appear repeatedly, often referencing the same locations. The repetition was not flagged. It was interpreted as diligence. Once a system resumed operation, the matter was considered complete. Streetlight maintenance logs from this period are extensive. Certain locations appear repeatedly, not sequentially, not predictably. Bulbs are replaced. Wiring is checked. Fixtures are inspected. The behavior does not change. Failures occur in clusters that do not align with electrical distribution maps. This inconsistency is noted. It is not investigated. Each entry is evaluated independently. The conclusion remains unchanged, resolved. Weather became a reliable explanation for nearly everything. Fog justified delays. Storms explained power issues. Cold nights accounted for discomfort. When weather reports failed to align with lived experience, experience yielded. Ravenwood learned to accept mismatch without resolution. This prevented conflict. It also prevented inquiry. Homes adapted before people acknowledged why. Curtains were drawn earlier than necessary. Porch lights stayed on even when no one was expected. Furniture was rearranged repeatedly until rooms felt stable. Beds were positioned away from corners. Basements were used less often. Attics remained untouched. Residents offered practical explanations when asked. Drafts, glare, better sleep. These adjustments spread gradually. There was no moment when everyone began doing them at once. They appeared in one house, then another, until they were simply how homes were arranged in Ravenwood. Mirrors became a minor but persistent complaint. Households replaced them repeatedly, citing distortion or discomfort without visible damage. Glass remained intact. Frames were unbroken. Reflections appeared normal at first glance. Unease emerged only after prolonged observation. Residents described difficulty holding their gaze, a sense that reflections lagged slightly behind movement, a feeling that rooms appeared deeper inside mirrors than in reality. No one reported seeing anything unusual. They reported discomfort. One general store stopped selling full-length mirrors after repeated returns. The owner cited superstition. No one argued. The mirrors were removed from inventory. Business continued uninterrupted. This became a pattern. Remove the object. Do not investigate the cause. Resume normal operations. Ravenwood schools were described as old even when they were new. The buildings were functional. The paint was fresh. The windows were intact. Teachers used the same phrasing across generations. This place feels older than it should. Hallways echoed improperly. Classrooms felt longer at night. Bells rang early or late without cause. Maintenance checks found no faults. Students occasionally became disoriented during routine drills. They followed instructions precisely and still arrived somewhere unexpected. Teachers attributed this to stress. Children were told to pay better attention. No further action was taken. Residents noticed smaller inconsistencies. Walking routes that felt different in winter than in fall. Shortcuts that took longer when retraced. Corners where conversations trailed off and restarted elsewhere. Adults did not connect these observations. They treated them the way people treat headaches. Common, annoying, not worth pursuing. The forest surrounding Ravenwood predates the town. It resisted development repeatedly. Logging attempts stalled without clear cause. Equipment failed. Crews reported becoming lost within sight of cleared paths. Bird populations avoided certain sections entirely. Local folklore warned children not to wander past marked trees. No one could later agree who marked them or when. Some remembered paint. Others remembered nails. Others insisted there had never been marks at all. Several residents reported hearing their names spoken from the tree line during heavy fog. Not shouted, not urgent. Spoken calmly, as if by someone standing just out of view. No disappearances were officially linked to the woods during this period. Unofficially, people avoided them anyway. They did not describe fear. They described inconvenience. Outside observers often misunderstood Ravenwood. Quiet was mistaken for safe. Ravenwood was quiet because it had learned that loud reactions changed nothing. Irregularities did not escalate rapidly. They repeated. They echoed. They formed patterns. That made them predictable. Stable did not mean harmless. It meant consistent. Nothing in these records suggests anticipation of change. There are no projections, no emergency provisions, no references to escalation. The town functioned. That was sufficient. When the first recorded incident occurred, it entered a system already structured to absorb it. At the time, there was no reason to treat it differently. The document, later referenced as the first recorded incident, does not announce itself. It appears as a routine municipal maintenance log. Standard form, standard formatting, standard distribution. The entry records a single streetlight on a residential road that failed to disengage at its scheduled cutoff. No shutoff at designated time. No priority code is assigned. No escalation marker is present. The entry is marked complete. At the time of filing, this description was unremarkable. Streetlights failed regularly. Timers drifted. Photocells degraded. These behaviors were common enough to require no explanation. The street itself does not stand out. Residential, low traffic, within walking distance of a school route. Near the edge of town, but not isolated. The lighting grid servicing the area had been inspected repeatedly over the years. No persistent faults were recorded. No upgrade requests were pending. The location does not appear in any prior summaries. It exists only as an address. A technician is dispatched. The dispatch sheet records arrival and departure times. The interval is short. No fault is identified. No repair is documented. The street light remains illuminated. This outcome is noted without emphasis. Operational upon inspection. The file is closed. A second copy of the maintenance log exists. The formatting is identical. The date matches. The location is the same. The difference is minimal. An additional line appears beneath the resolution note. Manual shutdown ineffective. The line is not initialed. No author is listed. No explanation is attached. The entry is still categorized as resolved. The additional information does not alter outcome classification. The technician dispatch sheet corresponding to the visit includes a signature. The signature does not match any technician roster from that year. This discrepancy is not noted. Temporary staff were common. Handwriting varied. No follow-up is requested. The light continues to remain illuminated beyond its scheduled cutoff. No outages occur. No secondary failures are reported. No complaints are logged. From an administrative standpoint, the outcome is acceptable. The light functions. The street remains illuminated. No hazard is identified. The file remains closed. A follow-up inspection is scheduled several weeks later. No justification is recorded. The inspection log notes arrival. It notes departure. It records no actionable findings. The behavior is unchanged. The light remains on. The file is closed again. Utility correspondence from the same period describes the system as operating within acceptable parameters. This phrasing appears repeatedly. System stable. No defect observed. Continue monitoring. Monitoring does not produce variation. The language does not change. Within months, additional copies of the same maintenance entry appear. They are not marked as duplicates. They are filed independently. Each describes the same behavior. Each concludes with resolution. The wording varies slightly. Resolved, stabilized, function restored. The behavior described does not change. No document contradicts another directly. They differ only in emphasis. This variation is not flagged. Clerical inconsistency is common. It does not prompt review. Later work orders reference previous adjustments without citation. The phrase appears casually. It implies shared context. No index exists yet. No category has been created. The understanding remains informal. Residents begin referencing the light casually, not as a complaint, as a landmark. Past the light, turn near the light. The phrasing appears in handwritten notes, delivery instructions, school pickup descriptions. The irregularity becomes functional. This utility reduces concern. A neighborhood watch summary from the same period notes improved nighttime visibility along the road. The light is not mentioned directly. Lighting adequate after dusk. The note is filed under routine observations. No response is issued. This is the first instance in which the irregularity is framed as beneficial. Internal summaries list the issue as resolved. No follow-up action is recommended. The light remains illuminated. This discrepancy is not addressed. Later reviews reveal conflicting timestamps across versions of the same record. Some indicate inspection before reported failure. Others list resolution prior to dispatch. These inconsistencies are not reconciled. Each document remains valid within its own context. A rewritten annual summary references the issue briefly. Minor lighting variants addressed without incident. The phrase replaces earlier descriptions. The new wording removes mechanical specificity. The outcome remains unchanged. During routine file maintenance, other minor issues from the same year are summarized and archived. Their original versions are removed. The lighting entries remain intact. No explanation is recorded. The most notable feature of this sequence is not the light. It is the record. The file persists. It is not corrected into disappearance. It is not condensed into summary. It remains accessible. Later documents reference it obliquely, not as a problem, as a reference point. At the end of the fiscal year, maintenance summaries include the entry, resolved, no additional comment. The light remains on. An uninitialed note appears in the margin of a later copy. Does not escalate. The note is not followed up. It remains. The town continues to function. That remains the deciding factor. By the end of this period, the incident has been logged multiple times. The behavior has not changed. The outcome remains acceptable. The documentation has grown denser. A revised maintenance summary appears several months after the initial entries. The revision does not add information. It removes specificity. The street light is no longer described as failing to disengage. It is described as exhibiting a timing variance. The phrase "manual shutdown ineffective" is removed. The new wording reads, "lighting variance observed. Condition stable. No justification is provided for the revision." The original versions remain in the file. Later, correspondence replaces the word failure entirely. Failure becomes irregularity. Irregularity becomes deviation. Deviation becomes condition. This progression is not documented. It appears naturally across drafts. No policy memo announces the change. The language settles because it reduces follow-up. A transportation planning document references nighttime visibility along the affected road. The document assumes the issue has been resolved. Post-adjustment conditions acceptable. No adjustment is described. No date is provided. The reference stands. A budget review notes no outstanding maintenance concerns related to street lighting. The review cites a prior resolution. The resolution is not identified. The citation satisfies the requirement. In a draft internal summary, the word incident appears. It is not capitalized. It is not defined. Initial incident addressed without escalation. The sentence is revised in the final version. Incident is replaced with matter. The draft remains in the file. A later audit reveals inconsistent timing across related documents. Some logs indicate inspection occurred before the reported failure. Others list resolution prior to dispatch. No attempt is made to reconcile these discrepancies. Each document is treated as complete within its own frame. Consistency between frames is not required. A handwritten note appears in the margin of one copy. Repeats but contained. No initials accompany it. No follow-up is recorded. The note is not removed. Despite the accumulating paperwork, internal confidence increases. Summaries emphasize stability. No disruption. No spread. No impact. These phrases appear repeatedly. They are accurate. During routine archival maintenance, several unrelated issues from the same year are condensed. Original reports are removed. Summaries are retained. The lighting files are reviewed. They are not condensed. No explanation is recorded. Later documents refer to the original variants. No document identifies which one that is. The reference functions anyway. Shared understanding has replaced citation. At this point, the file itself begins to acquire weight. Not metaphorically, physically. Additional copies, annotations, cross-references. The file is thicker than others from the same period. No one remarks on this. By the end of this phase, the behavior persists. No secondary effects are recorded. No escalation criteria are met. The file remains accessible. No further action is scheduled. What distinguishes this record from others is not severity. It is persistence without consequence. The system does not know how to close it, so it continues to hold it. After the first incident is filed and retained, the next entry arrives without emphasis. It does not reference the earlier record. It follows the same format, the same language, the same conclusion. A street light on a different residential road fails to disengage at its scheduled cutoff. The location is not adjacent. It is not on the same circuit. It does not share maintenance history. This distinction is not remarked upon. The entry is processed as routine. A technician is dispatched. Arrival and departure are recorded. The inspection is brief. No fault is identified. No repair is documented. The light remains illuminated. Operational upon inspection. The file is closed. No reference is made to earlier documentation. The wording mirrors the revised language established during the first sequence. Lighting variance observed. Condition stable. There is no mention of failure. No indication of concern. The phrasing appears already settled. A third occurrence is logged later that year. The description is shorter. Timing irregularity noted. No intervention advised. The wording suggests familiarity. No explanation is required. Response time shortens. Dispatch occurs quickly. Inspection is brief. Documentation is minimal. The process feels practiced. The outcome does not change. Viewed individually, the entries appear unrelated. Viewed together, they begin to form a loose pattern. Residential roads, routes used by children, areas near schools, stretches bordering the forest boundary. This pattern is not documented. Each file stands alone. No map is drawn. No overlay is produced. The absence of synthesis prevents escalation. Transportation records reflect minor adjustments. Stops shift slightly. Timings move by minutes. No justification is included. The routes function. No complaints escalate. Residents near the affected areas report no issues. Some note improved visibility. Others say nothing at all. No one requests change. The absence of concern reinforces closure. By the time a fourth similar entry appears, it attracts no comment. The process is familiar. The behavior is no longer framed as unusual. It is framed as expected variance. Later documents begin referencing prior occurrences. The phrase appears without citation. It assumes shared understanding. No index exists yet. No category is assigned. The understanding remains informal. Secondary systems show similar timing inconsistencies. Traffic signals pause longer than programmed. Pedestrian crossings reset unexpectedly. Each corrects itself. Each is logged. Each is closed. No correlation is drawn. Broadcast logs show comparable drift. Segments begin early. Music resumes mid-track. Technicians note signal variance. No repairs alter the behavior. Listeners adapt. Trust remains intact. Children adjust quickly. They learn which routes feel easier at certain times, which intersections to avoid during dismissal. They do not describe fear. They describe preference. Adults interpret this as intuition. From an administrative perspective, the situation remains successful. Issues are logged. Responses are dispatched. Outcomes remain calm. Nothing escalates. This satisfies existing criteria. By the end of this period, repetition no longer prompts evaluation. Entries are processed without deliberation. The Behavior is known. It is not named. Multiple occurrences have been recorded. No single instance has required escalation. The town continues to function. Repetition has not produced disruption. It has produced expectation. After several similar entries, response no longer involves assessment. Dispatch is automatic. Inspection is brief. Documentation is minimal. The process feels rehearsed. No one pauses to consider why the behavior repeats. The repetition itself has become the explanation. Descriptions contract further. Observed, stable, no action. Entire reports are reduced to single lines. The reduction signals confidence. No questions follow. Clerks handling these records no longer consult earlier files. They recognize the pattern without documentation. The recognition is informal. It does not require confirmation. This saves time. School maintenance logs begin to reflect the same language. Lights remain on longer than scheduled near certain entrances. Bells ring early or late in specific wings. The phrasing mirrors municipal reports. Acceptable variance. No disruption noted. Teachers adjust without comment. Children adapt without instruction. They hesitate at certain doors. Avoid specific stairwells. Move efficiently through altered routes. Asked why, they shrug. It's easier. Adults interpret this as maturity. Community language shifts. That one stays on. Always lit there. Better that way. The phrasing is neutral. It does not invite explanation. By now, entries are written as if the behavior is expected. The documentation no longer frames the lights as malfunctioning. They are simply noted. The outcome is assumed. Traffic flow adapts. Drivers slow instinctively near affected areas. Pedestrians cross where lighting feels consistent. No signage enforces this. Compliance is intuitive. Staff handling the files express no concern, not because they are unaware, because nothing requires their attention. The behavior repeats. The outcome holds. Fatigue does not produce alarm. It produces acceptance. A mid-year summary references the pattern briefly. Recurring lighting variances noted across several locations. No adverse impact observed. The summary is approved. No follow-up is scheduled. No one asks why the issue appears in multiple places. The absence of that question becomes noticeable only later. At the time, it feels unnecessary. Repetition has become background. The entries no longer feel like events. They feel like features. The town continues to function. That remains sufficient. Several years after the initial entries, a routine effort is made to consolidate older municipal files. The effort is not prompted by concern. It is prompted by space. Storage cabinets reach capacity. Indexes are revised. File drawers are relabeled. Older material is reviewed for relevance. This process follows established procedure. Recurring maintenance issues are identified. Patterns are summarized. Earlier drafts are removed once a stable. Description is established. This is standard practice. The streetlight records are included in the review. They are not summarized. Clerks attempting to condense the sequence encounter difficulty, not because the material is unclear, because it resists reduction. When summarized briefly, the entries feel incomplete, not inaccurate. Incomplete. Key details seem necessary even when they repeat. Removing them alters the meaning of the whole. Dates feel important. Language feels specific. Sequence feels required. Partial retention feels incorrect. The files are returned to storage intact. This decision is not debated. It is repeated. Other recurring issues from the same period compress easily. aging pipes, seasonal outages, equipment failure. These files are reduced to summaries without loss. Their original versions are removed. The lighting records remain unchanged. No explanation is recorded. The retained files differ subtly from others of the same era. They contain fewer marginal notes. They show fewer revisions. They appear finished without feeling closed. They are clean. This cleanliness distinguishes them without drawing attention. In other categories, redundancy is treated as inefficiency. In this one, redundancy is tolerated. Multiple versions of the same entry remain. Formatting varies slightly. Language shifts gently across copies. No attempt is made to reconcile these differences. The presence of variation is accepted. During this period, terminology continues to soften. Failure becomes variance. Variance becomes condition. Condition becomes expected behavior. These changes are not accompanied by training or directive. They appear naturally, as if the language had always existed. No one notices the transition as it occurs. Residents describe the affected lighting as normal. Older residents disagree on when it began. Some recall a time before, others do not. The disagreement does not matter. The light has no clear origin. From an administrative perspective, the situation remains successful. Costs do not increase significantly. No injury reports are filed. No community complaints escalate. The irregularity produces no measurable harm. Continuity is preserved. This satisfies existing performance metrics. Other departments begin referencing lighting conditions indirectly. Traffic planning documents note improved nighttime visibility. School safety summaries mention consistent illumination along certain routes. None identify the source. They describe outcomes. Visibility adequate. Conditions stable. The cause is assumed to be known. No diagram of affected locations is produced. No comparative chart is created. Each record remains discrete. This prevents synthesis. It also prevents concern. The system is not designed to see accumulation. It is designed to close individual cases. Over time, phrasing stabilizes completely. Condition stable. No intervention advised. These phrases appear verbatim across multiple years. The repetition communicates certainty. Residents cease mentioning the lights. They no longer serve as landmarks. They no longer require explanation. They are simply present. Children who grow up near the affected roads assume this is how lighting behaves. Adults stop remembering otherwise. The loss of contrast is gradual. No one marks the moment it occurs. An internal index document from this period lists the recurring files under a single heading. The heading is brief. Lighting variances. Historical. No dates are attached. No locations are specified. The heading remains unchanged in later revisions. Ravenwood continues to avoid attention. It does not request oversight. It does not require additional funding. It does not generate inquiry. The issue remains local. Quiet problems are preferable to loud ones. By the end of this phase, the records are no longer waiting to be closed. They are being kept because they cannot be reduced. The town does not interpret this as failure. It interprets it as stability. By the 5th year of documentation, the accumulated records associated with the lighting variances require deliberate filing decisions, not because of urgency, because of volume. Cabinets are reorganized, file drawers are relabeled, indexes are rewritten to accommodate growth. Most recurring maintenance concerns from the same period are reduced to brief summaries. earlier drafts are removed once a stable description is established. This is consistent with long-standing municipal practice. The lighting records are reviewed alongside these materials. They are not summarized. There is no meeting recorded regarding this exception. No memo explains why the files remain intact. The decision appears procedural rather than intentional. Clerks handling the material describe difficulty deciding what to remove. Individual entries feel insufficient when isolated. Grouped together, they feel complete. Partial retention feels inaccurate. The full set is returned to storage. This occurs more than once. Other infrastructure issues from the same period reach closure through replacement or removal. Equipment is upgraded. Systems are retired. Obsolete elements are decommissioned. The street lights remain unchanged. They are not upgraded. They are not removed. They are not isolated. They continue to function within their altered state. This lack of finality is not recorded as a problem. It is not recorded at all. Secondary references appear across departments. Traffic planning documents note improved nighttime visibility along specific corridors. School safety summaries mention consistent illumination near certain entrances. None identify the source of these conditions. They describe outcomes. Visibility adequate. Conditions stable. The cause is assumed to be understood. From an administrative perspective, the situation remains successful. Costs do not increase significantly. No injury reports are filed. No community complaints escalate. The irregularity produces no measurable harm. Continuity is preserved. This satisfies existing performance metrics. No diagram of affected locations is produced during this period. No comparative chart is created. Each record remains discrete. The system does not encourage synthesis. It encourages closure. Language continues to harden through repetition. Conditions stable. No intervention advised. The phrasing appears verbatim across multiple years. The consistency communicates certainty. Residents cease mentioning the lights altogether. They no longer serve as landmarks. They no longer require explanation. They are simply present. Children who grow up near the affected roads assume this is normal lighting behavior. Adults stop remembering otherwise. The loss of contrast occurs gradually. No one marks the moment it completes. An internal index document from this period introduces a new organizational choice. The lighting records are grouped under a single heading. The heading is brief. Lighting variances. Historical. No dates are attached. No locations are specified. The heading remains unchanged in later revisions. The town continues to avoid attention. It does not request oversight. It does not seek external review. It does not generate inquiry. The issue remains local. Quiet conditions are preferable to loud ones. By the end of this phase, retention is no longer an exception. It is a method. Records are kept not because they are unresolved, but because they no longer need to be. The system has learned what it can live with, and it has learned not to ask what that tolerance might invite. Correspondence from outside agencies increases gradually during this period. The increase is subtle. It does not present as scrutiny. It presents as routine data collection. Requests arrive for infrastructure summaries, environmental conditions, utility reliability, population stability. The requests are non-specific. They are framed as part of broader regional assessments. Ravenwood responds promptly. The town's responses are thorough and clean. Figures align. Dates are consistent. Language is neutral. Irregularities are noted as resolved. Patterns are described as seasonal. Stability is emphasized. Nothing in the data suggests urgency. The summaries are accurate. They simply omit context. Over time, external correspondence begins to reflect local phrasing. Not exactly, but closely. Words like variance, stabilization, and acceptable parameters appear with increasing frequency. These terms arrive without introduction. They fit easily into existing documentation. No one questions their origin. Occasional site visits follow. They are not announced as inspections. Visitors do not carry visible authority. They do not request meetings. They do not issue instructions. They ask general questions. They take careful notes. They visit the same locations repeatedly, near schools, along residential roads, at the edges of town where development thins into forest. They do not stay long. Their presence does not interrupt routine. This matters. Disruption would have prompted notice. The absence of disruption allows continuation. Residents recall unfamiliar vehicles parked briefly and then gone. No one asks who they were. They do not ask to be known. Notes are taken. No conclusions are shared. After these visits, municipal documentation becomes more uniform. Headers align across departments. Formatting standardizes. Terminology settles. The changes feel administrative. They are accepted without discussion. School memos adopt the same language. Irregularities are described as expected conditions. Adjustments are framed as precautionary. Parents sign permission forms without reading closely. The language is dense and reassuring. No objections are recorded. Children continue to adapt quickly. They move through hallways with efficiency. They avoid specific stairwells without instruction. They hesitate at certain doors and move on. They do not describe fear. They describe ease. Adults interpret this as maturity. Internal summaries from this period express confidence. Processes are described as effective. Community impact is described as minimal. The town appears manageable. This assessment is repeated. Questions are no longer asked because outcomes remain stable. Data collection replaces investigation. Observation replaces explanation. This shift reduces friction. It also removes responsibility. The town continues to function. Schedules hold. Services operate. Daily life proceeds. Nothing escalates. This remains the central measure of success. What distinguishes this phase is not intervention. It is alignment. External language mirrors internal language. Internal records anticipate external expectations. No directive enforces this. The system adjusts on its own. By the end of this period, Ravenwood is no longer only managing itself. It is being observed in a way that requires no response. The town does not notice the difference. There is no reason to. The phrase appears without announcement, not in a report, not in a memo, in an index. A typed reference sheet used to guide file retrieval includes a new heading beneath routine maintenance categories. First recorded incident. No description follows. No criteria are listed. No author is identified. The heading is not emphasized. It appears between unrelated entries. It is aligned with the rest of the text. It uses the same font. No one comments on it. Files that predate the heading are quietly associated with it. They are not moved. They are not renamed. They are referenced. A mark appears in a margin. A number is added to a corner. A cross-reference is noted without explanation. The files themselves remain unchanged. This creates the appearance of intention. At the time, it feels procedural. No document explains why this sequence qualifies as an incident. No threshold is cited. No outcome is described. The term exists without justification. This is consistent with local practice. Definitions are secondary to outcomes. During this period, internal summaries begin referencing calm explicitly. Situation remains calm. Community response stable. No disruption observed. Calm replaces resolution as the primary indicator of success. If calm persists, the matter is considered handled. Understanding is not required. The word incident begins to appear more frequently. It no longer refers to accidents or failures. It refers to moments that require attention and then end quietly. A light remains on longer than expected, then returns to baseline. A door locks briefly, then opens. A student becomes disoriented, then resumes routine. Each instance is logged. Each is labeled successful. Success is defined by return to calm. Incident reports remain internal. They are not shared with county offices. They are not summarized publicly. They are not escalated. They are complete and self-contained. This prevents interpretation. It also prevents scrutiny. School documents adopt the same language. Minor incident resolved. No further action required. The phrasing appears without detail. Teachers do not request clarification. Parents are not notified. The absence of reaction reinforces the language. Residents are aware that adjustments occur. Lights change. Schedules shift. Routes feel different. They do not frame these changes as incidents. Life continues. The lack of disruption confirms that nothing is wrong. Memory begins to soften. Residents struggle to recall when certain conditions began. They remember outcomes, not transitions. The town feels consistent. Consistency overrides recollection of difference. No formal decision approving this approach exists. No vote is recorded. No directive is issued. The approach spreads because it functions. The town remains intact. By the end of this phase, the phrase "first recorded incident" has weight. Not because it describes an event, because it organizes everything that followed. It becomes a reference point without an origin, a beginning without a beginning. After the first recorded incident is indexed and retained, the town's approach shifts quietly. Response gives way to management. Issues are no longer framed as problems to be solved. They are treated as conditions to be handled. Handling emphasizes containment. Containment emphasizes calm. This distinction is not articulated. It is practiced. Containment ceases to be an action taken after an occurrence. It becomes an ongoing state. Lights adjust themselves without notice. Schedules realign without revision. Doors lock and unlock without record. These behaviors are documented without urgency. They are described as expected variance. No one asks what they are being contained from. On occasion, calm does not hold immediately. A light remains on longer than expected. A door refuses to open from either side. A student becomes distressed without identifiable cause. Each instance ends. This is the detail that matters. The ending restores calm. The duration is secondary. Responses remain quiet. No alarms, no raised voices, no visible authority. Rooms are cleared gently. People are guided elsewhere. Schedules shift without explanation. No one is sent home early. The day continues. Reports describing these moments are brief. They avoid emotional language. Localized disruption. Temporary displacement. Resolved without secondary effects. Fear is not documented. Certain spaces become unavailable. A classroom near the back of a school closes indefinitely. A hallway is no longer used during transitions. A storage room is locked and not reopened. Maps are updated quietly. The changes are subtle. People adjust without discussion. Containment becomes ambient. Heating systems shift room by room. Bells ring earlier or later. Lighting dims selectively. No central control is identified. The environment adapts. Town stories lose sequence. Events are remembered without causes. Outcomes are recalled without beginnings. When residents compare memories, discrepancies are gentle and easily dismissed. No one insists. Fear requires clarity. Ravenwood never receives enough of it. Moments end before escalation. Explanations arrive before questions form. Unsettlement passes without becoming anything else. Night adjustments follow. Streetlights dim later into the night. Suggested curfews circulate without enforcement. Windows remain dark. Crime statistics remain unchanged. The adjustments are justified. Objects disappear from public spaces. Bulletin boards, unused lockers, extra mirrors. No one recalls their removal. They simply are not there anymore. Ravenwood learns to continue without resolution. Things end without explanation. That is enough. The town keeps moving. Ravenwood remains intact. It does not react loudly enough to be corrected. It does not resist strongly enough to be restrained. It adapts. As management becomes routine, Ravenwood gradually loses its ability to compare present conditions to earlier ones. This does not arrive as confusion. It arrives as efficiency. Residents can describe how things are. They struggle to describe how things changed. When asked to compare, they pause longer than expected. Not because memory fails, because comparison no longer feels useful. Records mirror this shift. Documents describe current states without reference to prior versions. Outcomes are recorded without origins. This simplifies reporting. It also removes narrative. Mornings stop feeling like transitions. People wake already alert, as if sleep were a pause rather than a reset. Kitchens fill with light too quickly. Radios come on mid-sentence. Children dress without reminders. Shoes wait by doors. Backpacks rest where they always have. Parents watch them leave with a sense of relief they cannot identify. Nothing feels wrong. Nothing feels new. School days lose their markers. Assemblies shorten. Announcements thin. Holidays feel closer together. Teachers note that lessons move smoothly. Questions are rare. Silence is mistaken for focus. Reports describe improved engagement. No one asks what has been lost. Ravenwood begins to feel flatter, not geographically, conceptually. Places blend together. Routes feel interchangeable. Direction matters less than arrival. Residents stop giving detailed directions. Just keep going. You'll know when you're there. They are always correct. Homes turn inward. Families spend more time in shared spaces. Doors remain open. Lights stay on in specific rooms and off everywhere else. Basements are avoided without discussion. Attics are entered rarely. Furniture is rearranged often, then left untouched for long stretches. Some layouts last. Town hall meetings continue. Attendance declines slowly. Agendas shorten. Votes pass without debate. Discussion ends early. No one disagrees because no one feels the need to. Language simplifies. Sentences shorten. Descriptions grow vague. Specifics feel unnecessary. People understand one another without detail. This efficiency is praised. Misunderstandings become rare because expectations are narrow. A low-level anticipation settles over the town. Not dread, not excitement, expectation. As if something is pending and always has been. No one speculates. Dreams become harder to describe. Not because they are disturbing, because they lack form. People wake knowing they have dreamed. They cannot say what about. This becomes normal. Eventually, before stops referring to a time. It refers to a condition. Before things settled, before it worked better. Asked to clarify, residents struggle. The timeline feels soft. Documents from this period show similar softness. Dates remain accurate. Sequence becomes less important. Entries are complete. They are also isolated. The system no longer encourages comparison. By the time anyone notices that comparison has become difficult, there is nothing left to compare against. The town functions. That is enough. By the time the first recorded incident is referenced formally in internal summaries, Ravenwood is already aligned. This alignment is not announced. It is not approved. It is observed. Systems that once required repeated adjustment now settle immediately. Schedules align without revision. Infrastructure accepts change without resistance. What previously pushed back no longer does. No one records the moment this occurs. There is no threshold. Daily routines become exact. Wake, move, return. Interruptions are rare. When they occur, they correct themselves quietly. Missed steps fold into the next action without consequence. Delays resolve before they are noticed. Residents describe feeling less tired. This is recorded as improvement. Children adapt completely. They move through hallways without hesitation. They avoid specific doors instinctively. They follow instructions that are never spoken aloud. Teachers praise focus. Parents praise calm. No one asks what the children understand that adults do not. The forest no longer feels adjacent. It feels incorporated. Lights near the tree line pulse faintly at night, steady enough not to draw attention. Access paths remain clear but unused. Animals stay away. No one mentions it. The first recorded incident appears in internal references, not as a warning, as a baseline. It represents a method rather than an event. Record, close, continue. This sequence is repeated. Memories persist without attachment. Events are recalled without emotion. Earlier versions of the town feel theoretical. People speak about the past, the way they speak about places they have never visited. There is no grief. Questions stop forming. Not because answers have been found, because curiosity no longer produces outcomes. Updates are accepted without context. Changes arrive already normalized. The town runs smoothly. The last locally authored notes are brief. Short sentences, minimal detail, clean formatting. They describe a town operating within expected parameters. No concerns noted. At some point, documentation changes ownership. Municipal phrasing gives way to institutional language. Headers change. Signatures change. The transition is seamless. No overlap is recorded. This archive does not document the beginning of intervention. It documents the end of something else, a version of Ravenwood that required explanation. By the time the first recorded incident was formally recognized as such, Ravenwood was already prepared. It had learned how to accept, how to adjust, how to forget without distress. Nothing was taken suddenly. Everything was given up gradually. The town remained intact.